Hi, I'm Maren 34, marketing director from Boston. 3 years of unexplained blackouts, tingling limbs, and crushing fatigue were dismissed until an MRI revealed multiple sclerosis lesions scattered across my brain. The day my body betrayed me during my biggest presentation wasn't weakness, it was my first major attack. Finally, I had proof I wasn't crazy. Have you ever felt the crushing relief when your suffering is finally validated? Comment below if you face disbelief before diagnosis. Like this video if Maren's struggle speaks to you. Subscribe to our channel for more stories of triumph against invisible battles. And share with someone fighting to be heard. The radiologist. Face changed instantly as Maren's scan illuminated the screen, revealing ghostly white patches scattered throughout her brain. For 3 agonizing years, her boss called her dramatic. Her mother suggested therapy, and her husband sighed with growing impatience until those glowing lesions finally gave her invisible enemy a name. 6 months earlier, the conference room had fallen silent as Maren Whitaker's PowerPoint slide hung frozen on the screen. Her carefully prepared presentation, the culmination of 3 months' work, forgotten as she gripped the edge of the podium, her vision tunneling to a pinpoint. "I just need a minute," she managed to whisper before her knees buckled. She came to with Reed Calloway, her department head, hovering over her. The concern in his eyes quickly hardened to something else, disappointment, maybe even suspicion. "I've called an ambulance," said Delia from HR, the only person who'd rushed to help rather than gawk. "That's unnecessary," Maren protested, struggling to sit up. "I probably just need water." Later, in the sterile examining room of an urgent care center, a young doctor barely looked up from his tablet as he delivered his assessment. "Your vitals are normal. Likely just stress and dehydration. Try to get more sleep." When Cole picked her up, his initial worry had already begun morphing into the familiar expression she'd grown to dread, a mixture of concern and impatience. "What did the doctor say?" he asked, keeping his eyes on the road. The usual. "Nothing's wrong, just stressed." "Maybe you should cut back on those extra projects," Cole suggested, not unkindly. "You've been pushing yourself too hard." "I haven't been doing anything different than usual." He sighed. "Maren, something's causing this. If it's not physical, you think I'm making it up." The words came out sharper than intended. "Of course not, but maybe Mom's right. Maybe talking to someone would help." Her mother's voice echoed in her mind from their last conversation. "Darling, everyone gets tired. Not everyone collapses in meetings. Perhaps it's anxiety." Dr. Bernstein is excellent. He helped Cousin Patty with her panic attacks. That night, alone in their bathroom, Maren stared at her reflection. The woman looking back appeared normal, perhaps a bit pale, with shadows under her eyes, but otherwise the same ambitious marketing executive she'd always been. The one who graduated summa cum laude. The one who made director by 32. Not someone who needed excuses, but as she raised her hand to brush her teeth, her fingers tingled with that now familiar numbness. Sometimes it lasted minutes, sometimes hours. Like the occasional double vision. The crushing fatigue that sleep couldn't touch. The brain fog that descended without warning. "Get it together," she whispered to her reflection, because excuses weren't tolerated in the Whitaker family. Not by her surgeon father, who'd operated through pneumonia. Not by her mother, who'd planned charity galas through migraines. Certainly not by her perfect sister Vivian, who'd returned to her law practice 3 weeks after giving birth, when the text from Reed came through, "Hope you're feeling better." Need that Johnson proposal by morning, Maren straightened her shoulders. She would power through, like always, because the alternative was unthinkable. Admitting that something was wrong with her, something invisible, something no one else believed, was real. The alarm blared at 4:30 a.m., Maren's new normal. She needed these extra hours, not for getting ahead, but for simply keeping up. Her morning routine had become a carefully choreographed dance of workarounds. Shower, sitting down when her balance was off. Electric toothbrush for the days her fingers wouldn't cooperate with regular brushing. Hair in a sleek ponytail because some mornings her arms felt too heavy to hold a curling iron. She kept a secret spreadsheet tracking her symptoms. The data showed patterns she couldn't ignore. Even if everyone else did, fatigue worsened with heat. Numbness intensified with stress. Vision blurred after exercise. By the time Cole woke at 6:15. She was already dressed, makeup perfect, first cup of coffee finished, emails answered. "You're always so put together," he murmured admiringly, still half asleep. "Don't know how you do it." He didn't see the naps in her car during lunch breaks. The pain medication stashed in every purse, desk drawer, and glove compartment. The times she locked herself in bathroom stalls to catch her breath when the fatigue crashed over her like waves. At work, the whispers had evolved from concern to criticism. Flaky, she overheard from the break room. Drama queen, from the creative team. Unreliable, worst of all, from Reed's office. Only Delia seemed to notice the truth, how Maren overcompensated, arriving first and leaving last. How she never complained, even when her speech occasionally slurred or her gait became unsteady. "You don't look well," Delia said one afternoon, closing Maren's office door behind her. "I'm fine," Maren replied automatically. "No, you're not. And I'm worried that whatever's happening is getting worse." Maren's carefully constructed facade cracked, just slightly. "The doctors say..." "What doctors? The urgent care guys? The GP who spent 5 minutes with you?" Delia shook her head. "My cousin. Amani is a neurologist. Let me call her." "Neurologist?" Maren forced a laugh. "It's not that serious." "Then let her tell you that." That evening, a migraine hit with such force that Maren vomited in her office trash can. She waited until the cleaning crew had gone before stumbling to her car. Halfway home, her right leg went completely numb. She pulled over, panicking, massaging life back into the limb for 20 minutes before continuing. Cole was asleep when she arrived. On the counter sat a note, "Dinner in fridge. Early deposition tomorrow. Don't wake me." Maren stood in the dark kitchen, a stranger in her own life. When had her marriage become a series of notes and misconnections? When had her body become this unreliable vessel? When had she started living in the spaces between symptoms? She didn't eat the dinner. Instead, she opened her laptop and searched neurologist specialties. Maybe it was time to stop making excuses. Maybe it was time to find answers. Sunday brunch at the Whitakers had been a tradition since before Maren could remember. Even now, as adults with their own homes and families, the ritual remained sacred. This particular Sunday, Maren had almost called to cancel. The fatigue had been crushing all week, and that morning she'd woken with a band of numbness circling her torso, like an invisible life preserver. But canceling again would only fuel her mother's therapy suggestions and her father's disapproving frowns. "You look tired," her mother announced as Maren and Cole arrived. Not hello, not I've missed you. Just an immediate assessment of her perceived failings. "I'm fine, Mom." The response was automatic now. Vivian swept in with baby Emma, 7 months old, and the family's reigning monarch. Maren adored her niece, this tiny, perfect person who didn't judge or doubt. "Can I hold her?" Maren asked, reaching out. "Of course," Vivian said, transferring the baby to Maren's waiting arms. For a few precious moments, everything seemed normal. Emma's weight solid against her chest, the baby's fingers exploring Maren's necklace with delighted concentration. Then it happened. The numbness that had been circling her torso shot down both arms like lightning. One moment she was holding Emma securely. The next, her arms simply stopped working. The baby slipped from her grasp. Cole's reflexes saved Emma from hitting the floor. He lunged forward, catching the infant mere inches from disaster. Emma, startled, began to wail. The room exploded. "What is wrong with you?" Vivian shrieked, snatching Emma from Cole. "I don't know what my arms just..." Maren stammered. "Enough excuses," her father thundered. "You could have seriously injured her." "I'm sorry, I didn't... Maybe you should leave," her mother suggested, voice icy with disappointment. Cole's hand on her elbow guided her out. In the car, the silence stretched between them like a living thing. "I swear I couldn't feel my arms," Maren finally whispered. "It just happened so suddenly." Cole's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "Do you understand what almost happened? In there, if I hadn't caught her. I know. God, I know. Maren, this isn't normal. These episodes, or whatever they are, you're becoming..." He stopped himself. "What? I'm becoming what?" Unsafe, he finished quietly. Careless. The word sliced through her. Careless. As if she'd chosen this. As if she'd deliberately endangered Emma. I've made an appointment, she said, voice hollow, with a neurologist. Delia's cousin. Cole said nothing, but his silence spoke volumes. At home, Maren locked herself in the bathroom. She slid down against the door until she hit the cold tile floor. For the first time since the symptoms began, she allowed herself to break completely. Sobs tore from her throat, raw and animal. She pressed her fist against her mouth to muffle the sound, certain that Cole wouldn't understand this either. Something was wrong with her. Something real. Something that stole her strength, her coordination, her credibility, her family's trust. Tomorrow she would see Dr. Imani. Tomorrow she would demand answers. Tonight, she would finally permit herself to be afraid. Dr. Imani writes. Office was nothing like the sterile, impersonal medical spaces Maren had visited before. Plants thrived on every windowsill. The walls displayed framed brain scans that somehow looked like abstract art, and the doctor herself, with her purple-framed glasses and natural hair styled in an elegant twist, exuded competence without coldness. Delia speaks very highly of. You, Dr. Wright said, reviewing Maren's hastily compiled medical history. Tell me what's been happening, in your own words. Maren hesitated. She'd repeated her symptoms so many times to so many dismissive faces that the words felt worn and worthless. Take your time, Dr. Wright said, setting aside the clipboard. I'm listening. Something in her tone, the genuine interest, perhaps broke the dam. Maren spoke for nearly 30 minutes without interruption, with fatigue that sleep couldn't touch, the numbness that came and went without warning, the vision problems, the occasional trouble finding words, the way heat made everything worse, the balance issues, the brain fog that descended like sudden. Whether Dr. Wright didn't type notes into a computer or check her watch. She simply listened, occasionally nodding, sometimes asking clarifying questions. And what have other doctors told you? She finally asked. Stress, anxiety, dehydration. One suggested I was working too hard. Another thought it might be early perimenopause, though I'm only 34. My GP ordered basic blood work, but it all came back normal. Has anyone ordered an MRI? Maren shook her head. No one thought it was necessary. Dr. Wright's expression remained neutral, but something flashed in her eyes, anger, perhaps, or frustration. Based on what you've described, I'd like to run several tests, including an MRI of your brain and spine. She held up a hand when Maren started to speak. I'm not saying I know what's causing your symptoms, but I believe they warrant investigation beyond basic blood work. You believe they're real, Maren said, her voice small. Dr. Wright's expression softened. Of course they're real. You're experiencing them. Those simple words, validation after months of doubt, nearly undid Maren completely. What are you looking for? She managed to ask. Several possibilities. One is multiple sclerosis. MS is an autoimmune condition where the body attacks the protective covering of nerve fibers, causing communication problems between the brain and body. The acronym hung in the air between them. Isn't that serious? It can be. But it's also treatable, especially when caught early. And I'm not diagnosing you. I'm simply investigating possibilities based on your symptoms. On the way out, Maren scheduled an MRI for the following week. She didn't tell Cole or her family about the appointment. Their skepticism had become too heavy a burden to bear, but for the first time in months, she felt something like hope. Not because she wanted something to be wrong, but because someone finally believed something might be. The imaging center waiting room was crowded with patients in various states of distress. A man with a cane, a woman in a wheelchair, a teenage boy with trembling hands. All of them visibly ill in ways Maren was not. Imposter syndrome washed over her. What was she doing? Here among people with real problems? Maybe everyone had been right. Maybe this was all in her head. Whitaker? The technician's voice cut through her thoughts. The MRI machine looked like a massive, high-tech donut. It'll be loud, the technician warned, handing her earplugs. Try not to move, even when you feel the urge. As she lay on the narrow platform, that would slide her into the machine's core. Maren's mind flashed to all the moments that had led her here. The presentation where she'd suddenly forgotten industry terms she'd known for years, stammering as Reed's expression shifted from confusion to embarrassment. The client dinner where she'd knocked over 3 water glasses because her depth perception had suddenly gone haywire. The morning meeting where she'd slurred her words so badly that Janine from accounting had asked if she'd been drinking. Each incident had chipped away at the professional reputation she'd spent years building. Each had been met with increasing impatience from colleagues who once respected her. Machine began its rhythmic pounding. Trapped in its narrow tunnel, Maren allowed herself to acknowledge her deepest fear. What if they found nothing? What if there was no physical explanation for what was happening to her? 45 minutes later, she was back in the waiting room. Dr. Wright had scheduled a follow-up for 3 days later to discuss results. "How was your dentist appointment?" Cole asked that evening. The lie had slipped out so easily that morning. One more in a growing collection of deceptions she used to avoid the weight of his skepticism. "Fine," she said. "Just a cleaning." At work. The next day, Reed called her into his office. His expression was grave. "Maren, we need to discuss your performance." She sat rigidly in the chair across from him, hands folded to hide their slight tremor. "The Johnson account has expressed concerns about consistency. The presentation materials for Westfield were submitted late, and frankly, your behavior in meetings has been erratic." "I'm dealing with some health issues," she began. Reed's expression hardened. "You've mentioned health concerns several times over the past few months, but with no specific diagnosis." "I'm seeing specialists, Maren," he interrupted. "You've been a valuable asset to this company. But if these issues continue without medical documentation, I'll have to reconsider your position on key accounts." The message was clear: bring proof or face consequences. Back at her desk, she found a cup of tea and a sticky note from Delia. How did it go with Imani? For the first time in weeks, Maren felt tears threaten. One person in her world still believed her. 3 more days until she would know if anyone else ever would. Dr. Wright's expression was serious as she turned her computer monitor toward Maren. On the screen was a series of brain images, Maren's brain with several bright white spots scattered throughout. "These white areas are lesions," Dr. Wright explained, her voice gentle but clinical. "They indicate areas where the myelin, the protective covering around nerve fibers, has been damaged." Maren stared at the images, these concrete, undeniable pieces of evidence that she wasn't crazy, wasn't making excuses, wasn't being dramatic. "So it's definitely MS?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Based on your symptoms, these MRI results, and the additional tests we've run, yes. You have relapsing, remitting multiple sclerosis. Multiple sclerosis." The words landed with the weight of both verdict and vindication. "What happens now?" Maren asked. Dr. Wright outlined treatment options, explained medications, discussed lifestyle adjustments. Maren nodded mechanically, trying to absorb information that seemed simultaneously devastating and liberating. "I know this is overwhelming," Dr. Wright said, noticing Maren's glazed expression. "But MS isn't what it used to be. With early treatment, many people lead full, active lives with minimal progression. And without treatment, the disease can cause increasing disability over time. That's why early intervention is crucial." Maren thought about the months wasted being dismissed by doctors, doubted by family, judged by colleagues. Months when the disease had been free to attack her nervous system unchecked. "I'll have my staff prepare informational materials for you to share with your family and employer," Dr. Wright continued. "And I'd like to see you next week to discuss which medication will start." In the parking lot, Maren sat motionless behind the wheel. Outside, people went about their day walking, talking, living in bodies they could trust. She looked down at her hands on the steering wheel. These traitorous appendages that had dropped her knees, fumbled presentations, betrayed her in 100 small ways. Suddenly, and probably, she laughed. It bubbled up from some hysterical well inside her, this laughter that quickly dissolved into tears and back to laughter again. A diagnosis. A real, documented, provable medical condition with a name and treatment options. She wasn't crazy, she wasn't weak. She Wasn't making excuses, Dot. She had multiple sclerosis. The relief was so profound, it was almost euphoric. The validation, so complete it bordered on vindication. Her phone buzzed with a text from Cole. Meeting running late. Don't wait up, Dot, not yet, she thought. She wasn't ready to share this revelation. Not until she'd processed it herself, this strange new identity. Maren Whitaker, M's patient, first. She needed to sit with the paradox, the simultaneous grief of having an incurable disease and the profound relief of finally having proof. Maren arranged the materials. Carefully on the dining table, the MRI images. Dr. Wright's explanatory pamphlets, printouts from reputable medical websites. Physical evidence for the invisible enemy that had been attacking her from within. She'd waited 2 days, rehearsing this conversation in her mind, anticipating Cole's questions, preparing her responses. Now, hearing his key in the lock, her mouth went dry. "Hey," he said, loosening his tie as he entered. Then, noticing her serious expression and the papers on the table, "What's all this?" "I need to talk to you about something." Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. "I've been seeing a neurologist." Cole's expression shifted from confusion to wariness. "A neurologist? Since when?" "3 weeks ago. Dr. Amoni Wright." "She's Delia's?" "Cousin. And you didn't tell me because ... Maren met his gaze directly. "Because I couldn't handle one more person telling me it was all in my head." He had the grace to look ashamed. "Maren, please, just listen." She gestured to the chair across from her. "I've been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis." Cole sank into the chair. "Isn't that ... I mean, are they sure?" She slid the MRI images toward him. "These are my brain scans. The white spots are lesions, places where the disease has damaged the protective covering around my nerve fibers. That's why I've been having symptoms. The numbness, the fatigue, the coordination problems, they're all caused by the disease disrupting signals between my brain and body." Cole stared at the images. "So when you dropped Emma, my arms went numb. I couldn't feel them." "It wasn't carelessness. It was a mess." His eyes filled with tears. "Maren, I'm so sorry. I should have believed me." The words came out sharper than intended. "Yes, you should have. I did believe something was wrong. I just thought it was stress, or that I was making excuses," she finished. "Like everyone else thought." The hurt in his eyes was real, but so was hers. The months of doubt had eroded something fundamental between them. "What happens now?" he asked finally. "Is there a cure?" "No cure, but there are treatments to slow progression and manage symptoms." She pushed a pamphlet toward him. "I'll be starting medication next week." Cole reached across the table for her hand. She let him take it, though part of her wanted to pull away. "We'll get through this together," he said. It should have been comforting. Instead, it sparked a flare of resentment. "I've been getting through it alone for months," she said quietly, "while you and everyone else thought I was being dramatic." His hand tightened on hers. "I want to make that right. I don't know if you can." The truth hung between them, a new presence in their marriage, the knowledge that when she'd needed belief most, he'd chosen doubt. Maren squared her shoulders before entering Reed's office, the folder containing her diagnostic documents clutched, perhaps too tightly in her hand. Julia sat beside Reed, her presence both surprise and support. "Thank you for meeting with me," Maren began, settling into the chair opposite Reed's imposing desk. "I wanted to discuss my recent medical diagnosis and what it means for my position here." Reed leaned forward, expression neutral but attentive. "Go on. I've been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis." The words came easier now with each telling. "It explains the symptoms I've been experiencing these past months, the fatigue, coordination issues, cognitive difficulties." She slid the folder across the desk. Reed opened it, his eyes widening slightly at the MRI images, an official letterhead from Dr. Wright's office. "This is unexpected," he said finally. "For me as well," Maren replied. "But it's also a relief to have answers," Julia spoke up. "MS is covered under the ADA as a disability that may require reasonable workplace accommodations." Reed's gaze snapped to her, then back to Maren. "Of course, whatever you need." The sudden shift from skepticism to accommodation felt almost dizzying. Just last week, he had been threatening her position. Now, faced with medical documentation, his tune had changed completely. I've outlined some requested modifications, Maren continued, finding strength in her preparation. Flexible hours when symptoms flare, the option to work remotely on high fatigue, days, adjustments to my client load to reduce travel, which exacerbates symptoms. Reed nodded, perhaps too enthusiastically. We can certainly implement these. Right, Delia? Absolutely, Delia affirmed. We'll draw up the formal paperwork today. A brief silence followed, heavy with unspoken acknowledgments. Maren, Reed began awkwardly, I want to apologize for any misunderstandings about your performance recently. Had I known, you couldn't have known, Maren interrupted, saving him from his fumbling apology. I didn't know myself until recently, but I did try to explain that something medical was happening. The implication hung between them. He'd chosen not to believe her. Moving forward, Julia interjected smoothly, we want to support you fully. The company values your contributions immensely. Maren caught the slight emphasis on values, present tense, not past. Her position was secured. As the meeting concluded with handshakes and assurances, Maren felt a complex mixture of emotions. Relief at the workplace accommodations, vindication at Reed's evident discomfort, gratitude for Delia's unwavering support, but beneath it all simmered a quieter feeling, anger. That it had taken medical documentation, physical proof for her, experience to be deemed valid, that her word alone had never been enough. Outside Reed's office, Delia squeezed her arm. You did great in there. I had a good advocate, Maren replied. Thank you. How did Cole take the news? Maren hesitated. He's processing, like everyone and your family. That's next on my list, Delia nodded, understanding. One battle at a time, battle. The word felt right. This wasn't just a diagnosis, it was a reckoning. With her health, her relationships, her identity. And for the first time since symptoms began, Maren was finally armed with the truth. Maren chose a public restaurant for telling her family. Neutral territory, less room for dramatic scenes. Her parents and Vivian arrived together, Cole beside her for moral support, though the tension between them remained palpable. You look better, her mother observed, settling into her seat. That new foundation I recommended. Actually, Maren said, bypassing the makeup comment, I asked you all here because I have something important to share. She'd decided against bringing the MRI images. This wasn't a presentation requiring visual aids. This was her family. They should believe her word. I've been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. The words landed like stones in still water, creating ripples of reaction across their faces. Shock, confusion, disbelief. Musos, her father repeated, physician instincts kicking in. Who diagnosed you? What tests did they run? Maren outlined Dr. Wright's credentials and the diagnostic process. Her father nodded, medical jargon apparently satisfying his professional skepticism. Her mother's eyes had filled with tears. But mess is so serious. Are they absolutely sure? Yes, Mom. The MRs are definitive, but you always seem so normal, Vivian said, frowning. I mean, except for those episodes. That's how EMS works, Maren explained. It's often invisible. The symptoms come and go. So when you dropped Emma... Vivian's voice trailed off. My arms went numb. I couldn't feel them. It was the disease, not carelessness. Vivian looked stricken. I said such horrible things to you. We all did, her mother admitted. We thought you were making excuses. There it was, the accusation that had haunted her for months, finally spoken aloud. That's exactly what everyone thought, Maren said, unable to keep the edge from her voice. That I was lazy or dramatic or making excuses. No one considered that maybe I was actually sick. How could we know? Her father asked defensively. You could have believed me when I said something was wrong. The table fell silent. A waitress approached, sensed the tension, and retreated without taking their orders. Well, her mother finally said, reaching across to pat Maren's hand, at least now we know it's not psychological. The comment ignited something in Maren. Even if it had been psychological, wouldn't that still be real? Still deserve compassion rather than judgment? Her mother withdrew her hand. I only meant I know what you meant. Maren took a steadying breath. The point is, I needed support, and instead I got doubt from everyone. Her gaze swept the table, including Cole. We're here now, her father said firmly, as though his declaration settled everything. What's the treatment plan? Maren explained the medication options, the lifestyle adjustments, the long-term prognosis. You'll move back home, of course, her mother announced. We can convert the downstairs study into a bedroom for when you can't manage stairs. Mom, I don't need. We should look into clinical trials, her father interrupted. I have colleagues at Mayo. Dad, my neurologist, is excellent. I can help with meals, Vivian offered. And you can see Emma whenever you want. Maren closed. Her eyes briefly. They were trying in their way. But they'd already shifted from doubting her completely to assuming total helplessness, without ever stopping at simply believing her experience. The needle trembled in Maren's hand as she prepared. Her first self-injection, the medication designed to reduce inflammation and slow disease progression, required 3 shots per week, administered at home. You can do this, she whispered to herself, alcohol swab poised over her thigh. The needle pierced skin with a sharp sting. Medication entered her system with a burning sensation. 1 down, countless more to go. This was her new normal, a life punctuated by medications, side effects, and careful monitoring. In the 3 months since diagnosis, she'd become fluent in a language she'd never wanted to learn. Relapse, remission, lesions, progression, demyelination, neurodegeneration. Her browser history read like a medical textbook. MS in pregnancy. Risks, cognitive symptoms management, heat sensitivity solutions, EMSA friendly exercise. The EMS online community had become her lifeline. People who understood the particular frustration of an invisible illness, who didn't need explanations for why she canceled plans or worked from home, who shared tips for managing symptoms and navigating healthcare systems. Living with Miss 87. Anyone else get that weird nerve zapped down your spine when you bend your neck? MS Warrior 4-5? Yes, it's called Lermit's sign. Mentioned it to my neuro yesterday. Maren. I get it every morning in the shower. Thought I was imagining things before diagnosis. These strangers understood parts of her experience that even Cole, despite his efforts, couldn't grasp. They celebrated small victories, a walk completed without fatigue, a day without numbness, successful self-advocacy with medical providers. She'd joined a weekly virtual support group led by a therapist who specialized in chronic illness. For a session, she'd stayed muted, camera off. By the 3rd, she was sharing her story. By the 5th, she was offering advice to newly diagnosed members. At work, the accommodations made a significant difference. Working remotely 2 days a week reduced fatigue. Modified lighting in her office helped with visual symptoms. Flexible hours allowed her to schedule around medication side effects. Reed had been surprisingly supportive since their meeting, even defending her to clients when deadlines needed adjustment. Whether from genuine concern or fear of legal repercussions, Maren couldn't tell. Either way, the result was the same. Even her relationship with Cole was slowly healing. He'd attended doctor appointments, researched MS treatments, joined online forums for partners of MS patients. His efforts were genuine, if belated. I was thinking about joining the MS Society walk next month, he mentioned one evening. They're raising funds for research. Maren looked up from her laptop, where she'd been researching cooling vests for the approaching summer. Really? Yeah. Thought we could make a team. Maybe get your family involved too. The suggestion touched her, a public declaration of support, a visible commitment to a largely invisible battle. I'd like that, she said, reaching for his hand across the couch. She was learning to navigate this new reality, the unpredictable symptoms, the medication, routines, the careful energy conservation. Some days were harder than others. Some moments still overwhelmed her, but she was no longer fighting alone, no longer doubting her own experience, no longer making excuses for a reality others couldn't see. She had a name for her enemy now. And finally, all eyes in the battle. The glass shattered against the kitchen floor, water splashing Maren's bare feet. Her 3rd dropped cup that week. This new medication was making her hands shake. I've got it, Cole said, already reaching for the broom. I can clean up my own messes, Maren snapped. The frustration of the day of the entire month boiling over. Cole straightened, broom in hand. I'm just trying to help. Well, sometimes your help feels like you're just waiting for me to screw up. The words hung between them, sharper than the glass fragments on the floor. That's not fair, Cole said quietly. Isn't it? You watch me like I'm about to break. You jump in before I even struggle. It's suffocating. What am I supposed to do? His voice rose slightly. Ignore when you need help? You're supposed to ask if I need help, not assume I can't handle basic tasks. Cole leaned the broom against the counter. So I'm damned if I do, damned if I don't? That's not, Maren began, then stopped, pressing her fingertips to her temples where a headache was forming. I'm sorry. It's been a bad day. It's been a bad month, Cole corrected gently. The new medication, I know. The side effects should level out soon. They cleaned up the glass together in silence, the tension still simmering beneath routine movements. Later, after a dinner neither of them really ate, Maren found Cole on the back porch, nursing a beer in the gathering. Twilight, can we talk? She asked, settling into the adjacent chair. He nodded, expression guarded. I shouldn't have snapped at you. But this whole situation, it's complicated for me to navigate, and I think it's complicated for you too. I'm trying, Maren. I really... I know. But sometimes it feels like you're trying to be my caregiver instead of my husband. Cole looked away. I'm just trying to make up for before. For not believing you. There it was, the unspoken guilt that had been shaping his behavior for months. I've forgiven you for that, she said softly, or I'm trying to. But your guilt isn't helping either of us move forward. What do you want from me then? A trace of frustration edged his voice. Partnership, not pity, not guilt, not hovering. And when you need help, then I'll ask for it. And when I can't ask, we'll have. Signals worked out. Cole took a long swallow of his beer. You know what scares me most? Not the physical stuff. It's the thought that someday you might not remember ... us, who we were before MS. The vulnerability in his admission touched her. That's extremely rare in MS, Cole. Dr. Wright said my type rarely affects cognition that severely, but it could. Anything could happen to either of us. Car accident, cancer, heart attack. We've always lived with uncertainty, we're just more aware of it now. He reached for her hand in the gathering darkness. For better or worse, in sickness and health, I meant those vows. So did I. She squeezed his fingers. But in sickness doesn't mean you become my nurse and I become your patient. We need to find a new normal that works for both of us. They sat together as night fell completely, two people relearning how to be partners on unfamiliar terrain, finding their way one conversation at a time. Maren was reviewing quarterly projections when Reed appeared in her doorway, knocking lightly on the frame. Got a minute? He asked, his usual commanding presence somehow muted. Of course. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. Noting the unusual tension in his posture, Reed settled heavily into the seat. My mother's been diagnosed with Parkinson's. The statement, so unexpected, momentarily left Maren speechless. I'm sorry to hear that. Early stages, but progressing faster than the doctors initially thought. He rubbed a hand across his face. I'm her primary caregiver now. That must be challenging, Maren offered, unsure why he was sharing this with her. Reed met her gaze directly. It's made me realize some things. About how I responded to your situation last year. Understanding. Stunned. Reed, you don't need to. I do, he interrupted. I dismissed your symptoms, treated them as excuses. Now I'm watching my mother struggle with an invisible battle of her own, facing the same skepticism from people who should know better. Admission hung between them, not quite an apology, but an acknowledgement. It's a common reaction, Maren said carefully. Invisible illnesses challenge people's understanding of disability. Still, Reed sighed. I should have done better. We're instituting new company-wide policies about medical accommodations. I'd like your input, given your experience. I'd be happy to help. As they discussed potential policy changes, Maren realized something had fundamentally shifted in their professional relationship. Reed was seeing her not just as an employee who needed accommodation, but as a resource, someone with valuable perspective. The conversation led to a broader initiative, a series of lunch and learn sessions about invisible disabilities in the workplace. Maren found herself volunteering to speak at the first one. "Are you sure?" Delia asked when Maren told her. "That's putting yourself in a vulnerable position." "Maybe that's exactly what's needed," Maren replied. "Vulnerability is strength." The following week, she stood before a conference room filled with colleagues, some of whom had whispered behind her back during her pre-diagnosis struggles. With Reed's public support and Cole in the back row for moral strength, she shared her journey. "Invisible illnesses force us to believe what we cannot see," she concluded, "to trust others' experiences even when they contradict our perceptions. In many ways, it's the ultimate exercise in empathy." The response was overwhelming. Colleagues approached with questions, confessions of their own invisible struggles, offers of support. Reed implemented flexible work arrangements company-wide. The HR department revised accommodation policies. The marketing team, Maren's own department, developed a campaign for a national MS organization pro bono. "You've started something important?" "Here," Reed told her after the third lunch and learn session, this one featuring a guest speaker with fibromyalgia. "We both did," Maren corrected. "Sometimes the most unexpected challenges bring the most unexpected allies." Reed nodded thoughtfully. "My mother asked about you. She'd like to meet for coffee sometime if you're open to it. I'd like that." Reed left her office. Maren reflected on the strange alchemy of suffering, how it could transform skeptics into advocates, colleagues into allies, strangers into community. The blog began as therapy, Maren's private digital journal chronicling Ham's journey. She wrote about medication side effects, about the particular exhaustion that healthy people couldn't comprehend, about the cognitive fog that sometimes descended without warning. One evening, fueled by frustration after a particularly difficult doctor's appointment, she wrote a post titled, "The Day They Finally Believed Me." It detailed the months of dismissal, the eventual diagnosis, the vindication of having physical proof of her invisible suffering. "Share this," Cole suggested after reading it. "Others might need to hear it." Hesitantly, she made the post public. By morning, it had been shared hundreds of times. By evening, thousands. Comments flooded in. "You've written my exact experience with fibromyalgia." Cried reading this. "Took 7 years to get my lupus diagnosis." Printing this for my family who still think I'm exaggerating my chronic fatigue. Overwhelmed by the response, Maren created a dedicated blog, The Invisible Fight. She posted weekly, addressing topics rarely discussed in glossy chronic illness literature: the strain on relationships, the grief for lost abilities, the constant self-doubt, the crushing financial burden of America's healthcare system. Her readership grew. Medical websites requested guest posts. A national MS organization asked her to speak at their conference. A pharmaceutical company developing MS treatments invited her to join a patient advisory board. "I never expected this," she told Dr. Wright during a checkup. "My diagnosis has somehow become my platform." "You found meaning in the suffering," Dr. Wright observed. "That's a powerful coping mechanism." "It's more than coping," Maren realized. "It's purpose." The blog expanded to include guest posts from others with invisible illnesses. Maren moderated online support groups. She developed resources for newly diagnosed patients, guidelines for their loved ones, and workplace accommodation templates that built on what she'd created with Reed. One afternoon, she received an email that stopped her heart momentarily. "Dear Maren, I'm a third-year medical student at Johns Hopkins. Your blog is now required reading in our patient communication course. Your post, What My Doctor Never Asked, has changed how I approach every patient interview. Thank you for making me a better future physician. Sincerely, Hannah Chomarin." Read the email 3 times, tears streaming down her face. For all the pain, the doubts, the struggles of the past year, knowing that future doctors might listen more carefully to patients like her felt like redemption. That evening, she started writing a new post, an open letter to medical students. It would become her most widely shared work, yet reprinted in medical journals, incorporated into nursing programs, quoted in healthcare policy discussions. "You're becoming an advocate," Cole observed proudly. "I'm just telling my story," Maren replied. "Sometimes that's the most powerful form of advocacy." As her online presence grew, so did her sense of community. The isolation that had defined her early symptoms gave way to connection with others fighting similar battles, with healthcare providers seeking to improve, with researchers working toward better treatments. For the first time since her diagnosis, Maren felt something unexpected: gratitude. Not for the disease itself, but for the perspective it had given her, the purpose it had revealed, the voice it had strengthened. She was still Maren Whitaker with MS, but now she was also something more: Maren Whitaker, advocate, educator, voice. For the invisible. 1 year to the day after her diagnosis, Maren stood before her closet, contemplating what to wear. Cole had been mysteriously insistent about dinner reservations, mentioning only that she should dress up a bit. She chose a navy wrap dress, not just because it complemented her coloring, but because its soft fabric wouldn't irritate her increasingly sensitive skin, and its wrap design made it easy to manage on days when her fingers weren't fully cooperative. These calculations, these constant accommodations to her body's new limitations had become second nature. Like the cooling vest she wore during summer heat, the voice-to-text software for fog days, the medication organizer with alarms on her phone, the energy budgeting that determined each day's activities. As she fastened her mother's pearl earrings, Maren studied her reflection. Physically, she looked much the same as before diagnosis, perhaps a bit thinner, perhaps with more shadows beneath her eyes, but to the casual observer, unchanged. Inside was different. The year had transformed her in ways both challenging and profound. She had learned patience with her body's limitations, discovered reserves of strength she hadn't known existed, developed fierce self-advocacy skills, found her voice as a writer and speaker, built a community of fellow warriors. The losses were real. Career momentum slowed, certain physical activities abandoned, energy constantly rationed. But the gains, unexpected as they were, felt equally significant. "Ready?" Cole called from downstairs. The restaurant was upscale but not ostentatious, with private booths and subtle lighting. As they followed the hostess through the dining room, Maren noticed a familiar face: Delia, seated with a man Maren didn't recognize. Then another familiar face: Dr. Wright with her wife. Then Reed and an elegant older woman who must be his mother. Understanding dawned as they approached a private room at the back. Cole had planned something. The door opened to reveal a gathering of perhaps 20 people: her parents, Vivian with baby Emma, colleagues from work, members of her support group, even Hannah Cho, the medical student who'd written that life-changing email. "Surprise?" Cole said softly beside her. 1 year of warrior status deserves recognition. Emotion clogged Maren's throat as she moved through the room, accepting hugs, handshakes, words of encouragement and admiration. Not pity, never that, but genuine respect for her journey. During dinner, Cole stood and raised his glass. "To Maren," he began, "who taught us all that strength isn't about never falling. It's about how you rise after each fall. Who showed us that invisible battles deserve visible support. Who transformed her pain into purpose. Others offered toasts." Reed spoke about workplace inclusion, Dr. Wright about patient advocacy, Vivian, tearful, about sisterly admiration, Hannah about medical education, each reflection illuminating a different facet of Maren's impact during this challenging year. When the formal dinner concluded, Cole revealed a final surprise: a small silver pendant in the shape of a brain, with tiny diamonds marking the locations of Maren's lesions. "To commemorate the moment everything changed," he explained. "When the invisible became visible." As he fastened it around her neck, Maren felt the weight of the year, the struggles, the triumphs, the moments of despair and discovery crystallized in this small, beautiful object. "Thank you," she whispered, to Cole and to everyone who had journeyed with her, "for believing me now, even when you couldn't see my battle before." 1 year, both an eternity and an instant. The first of many anniversaries to come, marking not just the day her invisible enemy was named, but the day her invisible strength was recognized by others, and finally, by herself. It began with a tingling in her left leg. Nothing dramatic, just pins and needles that didn't fade. Maren noted it in her symptom tracker app, but didn't worry over much. Small sensory disturbances came and went. By evening, the tingling had progressed to numbness that stretched from foot to hip. By morning, her entire left side felt heavy, uncooperative. When she tried to stand, her leg buckled beneath her. "I'm calling Dr. Wright," Cole said, helping her back to bed. "It might pass," Maren argued weakly, even as the room tilted alarmingly around her. "It might. But we're not waiting to find out." Dr. Wright listened to their description and didn't hesitate. "Go to the eye. I'll call ahead." Unlike Maren's first medical crisis, the collapse during her presentation when no one understood what was happening, this hospital visit unfolded with remarkable efficiency. The A staff had her MRI records, medication list, and Dr. Wright's notes before she arrived. They used the term relapse without questioning or doubt. "We're admitting you for 4 steroids," the neurologist on call explained. "The high-dose treatment should help reduce the inflammation causing these symptoms." The hospital room was standard issue sterile, but the care was anything but impersonal. Nurses responded promptly to her call button. Doctors explained treatment options clearly. Even the food service staff took note of her heat sensitivity and brought extra ice with each meal. Cole brought her laptop, set up her favorite podcasts, arranged video calls with her support group. Her parents delivered home-cooked meals suitable for her anti-inflammatory diet. Vivian brought baby Emma for brief morale-boosting visits. "Last time I was in a hospital, no one believed me," Maren remarked to Dr. Wright during rounds on the 3rd day. "Now everyone's jumping to help before I even ask." "That's how it should be," Dr. Wright replied. "And unfortunately, how rarely it is for too many patients." The contrast wasn't lost on Maren. The difference between facing illness alone, doubted and dismissed, versus facing it surrounded by knowledgeable advocates and believers was profound. On the 4th day, sensation began returning to her left side, first unpleasant tingling, then more normal feeling. By the 5th day, she could walk short distances with support. By the 7th, she was discharged with a follow-up appointment and rehabilitation plan. "The steroids worked well," Dr. Wright explained during their post-hospital visit. "But this relapse indicates we may need to consider adjusting your disease-modifying therapy." They discussed options, newer medications with potentially better efficacy but more serious side effects. Treatments that might require regular infusions rather than self-injections. The ever-present calculus of managing a chronic condition. Weighing benefits against risks, quality of life against disease progression. "What do you think?" Maren asked Cole that evening as they reviewed the treatment literature Dr. Wright had provided. "I think it's your body and your decision," he answered. "But I'll support whatever you choose." The response warmed her, not taking over, not minimizing. Just partnership. Later, as she updated her blog with a post titled "Anatomy of a Relapse," Maren reflected on the stark difference between her pre-diagnosis medical experiences and this recent hospitalization. The medical facts were the same: her body attacking itself, symptoms manifesting unpredictably. The disease hadn't changed, but everything surrounding it had: how she was treated, how she advocated for herself, how her support system responded. The relapse had been frightening. The symptoms might linger for weeks or months. The disease was still incurable, still unpredictable. But facing it as a recognized, legitimate patient rather than a doubted, dismissed complainer made all the difference. This time, when her body betrayed her, the world around her did not. The medical school auditorium was larger than Maren had. Expected rows of seats climbing upward like a stadium, filled with future doctors in various stages of their training. From her position at the podium, their faces blurred into a sea of attentive expressions. "Deep breath," Dr. Wright murmured beside her. "They need to hear this more than you need to be perfect." The invitation had come through Hannah Cho, the medical student who'd written about Maren's blog. What had begun as a guest lecture for a single patient communication class had expanded when faculty members read Maren's work. Now she was addressing the entire medical school as part of their Grand Rounds speaker series. "Good afternoon, Maren," began, her voice steadier than she felt. "My name is Maren Whitaker. I'm not a doctor or researcher. I'm here as a patient specifically, a patient who spent months being dismissed before receiving my multiple sclerosis diagnosis." She shared her story chronologically, the early symptoms, the urgent care visits, the GP appointments, the growing skepticism from medical professionals and family alike. She described the humiliation of being thought dramatic, the isolation of suffering without validation, the psychological damage of beginning to doubt her own experience. When we talk about iatrogenic harm caused by medical care itself, we often focus on physical errors. Wrong medications, surgical mistakes, hospital-acquired infections. But there's another form of harm that receives far less attention. The harm caused by disbelief. The auditorium was utterly silent. When medical providers dismissed my symptoms as stress or anxiety without proper investigation, they didn't just delay my diagnosis and treatment. They eroded my trust in healthcare. They damaged my relationships as others followed their lead in doubting me. They caused me to question my own sanity. Maren clicked to a slide showing a quote from her medical records. Patient reports numbness and fatigue, likely stress-related. Recommended rest and possible psychiatric referral. This note was written 6 months before my MS diagnosis. By that point, I had active lesions in my brain and spine. I wasn't just experiencing stress, my nervous system was under attack. She moved through her presentation methodically, citing research on diagnostic delays for women, for people of color, for patients with invisible or autoimmune conditions. She shared anonymized stories from her blog readers' years of suffering before Ehlers-Danlos diagnosis. Lupus patients told they were hypochondriacs, fibromyalgia patients prescribed antidepressants instead of pain management. The common thread. And these stories isn't just delayed diagnosis, she emphasized. It's the profound loss of dignity that comes with not being believed about your own body. In the final segment, Maren offered practical suggestions, listening techniques, questions that signal belief rather than skepticism, the importance of investigating symptoms even when the cause isn't immediately apparent. Medicine has always balanced science with trust, she concluded. You need objective data, yes. But you also need to trust that patients are experts in their own experience. When those two sources of information seem to conflict, the answer isn't to dismiss the patient's reality, it's to keep investigating until you reconcile the apparent contradiction. The applause was immediate and sustained. During the Q&A session, students and faculty alike asked thoughtful questions, not challenging her experience, but seeking to understand how they could do better. Afterward, a line of medical students waited to speak with her personally. Many shared stories of family members with invisible illnesses. Others admitted to biases they hadn't previously recognized. Several asked if they could email her with follow-up questions. You've started something important here, Dr. Wright said as they finally left the auditorium. Something that will ripple through their entire careers. I hope so, Maren replied. If even one patient gets diagnosed earlier because a doctor remembered today, it's worth it. That night, exhausted but fulfilled, Maren added a new line too. Her blog bio, patient advocate and medical educator. The labels felt right hard-earned identities emerging from the crucible of her diagnosis. Roles she never would have chosen, but now couldn't imagine relinquishing. The office space was small but bright, with large windows overlooking a tree-lined street. Maren surveyed the room, the conference table for support group meetings, the comfortable chairs for one-on-one consultations, the accessible bathroom and kitchenette, and felt a surge of pride. What do you think? She asked Cole, who was assembling a bookshelf against one wall. I think it's perfect, he replied. The Invisible Illness Alliance finally has a home. 6 months after her medical school speech, Maren had taken the leap. With Reed's blessing and support, she'd reduced her marketing role to part-time consultant and channeled her energy into establishing a nonprofit organization focused on advocacy, education, and support for those with invisible chronic conditions. Initial funding had come from unexpected sources, a grant from Reed's company, donations from medical professionals who'd heard her speak, contributions from blog readers, and a significant gift from her parents, who'd sold their vacation home to support. Her vision? It's not charity. Her father had insisted when she'd initially refused. It's investment in better healthcare. And it's our way of acknowledging that we should have believed you sooner. The organization had 3 core missions: supporting patients through diagnosis and treatment, educating medical providers about invisible illnesses, and advocating for policy changes that recognize the unique challenges of non-visible disabilities. Already, they'd established support groups for various conditions, created educational materials for families and employers, and begun collecting data on diagnostic delays for research purposes. Maren had hired 2 part-time staff as social workers specializing in chronic illness and a pre-med student handling administrative work. "The website's live," Cole announced, glancing at his phone. "And we already have 3 appointment requests." "And 1 volunteer application," added Lydia, the pre-med student, entering with coffee for everyone. "A woman recently diagnosed with fibromyalgia who wants to help with the support groups." As Maren reviewed the details, her phone rang Hannah. Cho, now in her residency, calling about a patient presentation collaboration at the hospital. Maren scheduled it between her blog deadline and a meeting with health policy advocates. This new life, this purpose born from pain required careful balance. She still had MEMS, still faced fatigue, still navigated unpredictable symptoms. On bad days, Cole stepped in to cover meetings. On worse days, everything paused while she rested. The organization's flexibility wasn't just its policy for others, it was its foundational practice. That afternoon, Maren met with her first official client, Zoe, 23, recently experiencing symptoms without diagnosis, facing skepticism from doctors and family. "I don't know what's wrong with me," Zoe confessed, tears streaming, "but I know something is, and no one believes me." "I believe you," Maren said simply, "and I can help you navigate this." As she outlined strategies for medical appointments, documentation techniques, and self-advocacy language, Maren saw her former self in this young woman, isolated, doubted, desperate for validation. "The hardest part isn't the symptoms," Zoe said. "It's feeling crazy when everyone dismisses them." "You're not crazy," Maren assured her, "and you're not alone. Not anymore." After Zoe left with resources, referrals, and a follow-up appointment, Maren stood at the window watching autumn leaves drift from the maple trees lining the street. Her reflection was superimposed on the glass, a ghost image floating over the outside world, visible and invisible simultaneously. Like her illness, like her strength. 2 years ago, she'd been collapsing during presentations, doubting her own reality, isolated in her suffering. Now she stood in an office dedicated to ensuring others wouldn't face the same lonely journey. Her phone buzzed with a text from Cole. "Dinner at 7? Your parents want to treat us to celebrate opening day." She smiled, typing back agreement that her MS wasn't gone. It would never be gone. The lesions in her brain and spine remained. The symptoms ebbed and flowed. The future held uncertainties. But surrounding the disease, containing it, contextualizing it, was everything else. Purpose, community, advocacy, love. They had said she was making excuses. Until her MRI showed multiple sclerosis. Now she had made something else entirely, meaning from the experience, connection from the isolation, power from the vulnerability, not just a diagnosis. Not just a patient, a voice for the invisible.